today's guest is a legend. He's a wrestling legend who probably has no idea how much I know about professional wrestling, which goes back to Lou Thesz and Nature Boy Buddy Rogers back in 1962 and 63. It goes back that far. And it has been it's part of my genome. And as much as you need to talk about your film and we're going to talk about it, I could talk wrestling all day and we're not gonna, because we need to talk about your movie. But isn't it crazy how musicians want to talk about wrestling, wrestlers want to talk about music? It's always the other side, isn't it?
Well, it's funny too, because we have a couple mutual friends, but one of them with Mike Portnoy. Mike and Charlie Benanti from Anthrax and I have a Beatles text group, and he's like, yeah, the only guy that knows as much about the Beatles as we do is JJ French. So this is the first time we've ever actually met face to face, I think. So to be
we met once. You ready for this? You guys opened for Seven Dust somewhere.
Yeah.
Some club.
Right. You managed them.
I managed Seven Dust at the time.
That's right. Yeah.
And you were there and you opened, and I'm like, I got to talk to this guy. I really want to talk wrestling with this guy, but Seven Dust was crazy, and there was so much going on. And we went backstage, and people think that guys like us know each other well, and we hang out all the time, and we really don't. But we did meet that one time, very, very briefly, and I enjoyed watching the show. And I saw in you, as you pointed out, because I watched the Lou Beato interview.
Rick
Beato interview. You talk about the cross pollination of the two and how they feed off each other, heavy metal, especially in pro wrestling.
Right.
And, just really quick, because I wrote it down. I just had to say this to you. So I used to watch Buddy Rogers, Haystacks Calhoun, Antonio Rocca, Argentino Apollo, the Kangaroos, the Wild Red Berry, Golden Boy Arnold Skull, and the Fabulous Moolah, Killer Kowalski, Gorilla Monsoon, Mr. Fuji, Bobo Brazil, Chief J Strongbow, Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund. I was actually at the Garden when Backlund, when Skolin threw in the towel on Backlund and gave the championship to the Iron Sheik. I was at the Garden a month later when the Sheik lost to Hulk Hogan. I was at the Garden a year after that when Lou Albano gave Dave Wolf's and his manager a gold record and he smashed it over his head. I was in the ambulance, quote, with Dave Wolf going to have his neck operated on.
See, it's so funny though, because I grew up in Winnipeg, so you grew up in New York, obviously, and every part of the country back then had its wrestling like that you wouldn't really see anywhere else. Like for me, it was AWA in Minneapolis that would come up to Winnipeg. But Winnipeg was a great wrestling town. It was a great rock and roll town. One of the first gigs I ever saw was you guys opening for Iron Maiden on the Power Slave tour.
Coldest day of my life.
I remember. It was freezing, right?
It was the coldest. People say to me, what do you remember touring? I'll go, I got to Winnipeg. And we pulled up in front of the hotel, and all I remember was seeing a bank thermometer, and it said -40. Yeah. And I said to the bus driver, that's not real, is it? He goes, oh, yeah. And I went, 40. I walked from the bus to the hotel and got a freezer burn on my arm. I don't know how the hell you guys do it.
But that's just how it was. Like you said, I remember that too. It was December of 1984. And it's probably the same when you were a kid. Your mom would take you and drop you off out front of the arena, and then you would go inside. But back then in that time frame, not only was it freaking freezing out, but there was also a lot of protesters right up front. Like if you listen to heavy metal, you're going to hell. And I was like, listen, you guys are really committed here because it is fucking freezing out. And you're worried about going to hell. Like hell wouldn't be so bad right now with -40 weather out here.
Well, I thought to myself, someone said to me, what's it like at -40? I said, well, there's no drug dealers on the corner. Because if there were, you should hire them because they've got real fortitude.
That's right.
I have a photo I want to briefly show you. I stayed with Michael Hayes for a weekend.
Wow.
Okay. In Texas during the Texas death match between him and the Von Erichs.
Wow.
And we had a mutual friend, Tommy Nast. Did you know Tommy Nast from the Album Network, who was a real rocker? Okay, so he's the one who introduced me to Michael Hayes.
Gotcha.
And he dragged me down to Texas, and we hung out for a week. And it was a crazy week. And then when the AWA came up to New York, I actually met Vern Gagne, and I wrote a script for the AWA.
No kidding.
To bring Lisa Sliwa into the AWA. See, I told you would go, yeah. Are you kidding me? This guy knows like this kind of stuff,
Yeah, totally, man.
So I totally do. And you've held so many belts. You're such a legend in wrestling. And we could go on forever, but I want to talk about this movie because let me tell you, I hit the preview And I'm sitting there going, man, this is a story that is not unusual, because so many bands back in the 80s who just missed it, you know, for whatever reason, they just kind of missed it. Could have been them too. So tell me about this band Siren. Tell me about your connection with them and why you decided to make this movie called I Am Too Old for This Shit.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, JJ, because people will say, like, I've never heard of Siren. That's the point. Nobody ever heard of Siren. And you know this because your band obviously made it to the top of the top, but most people's bands don't. But when I was in high school, everybody played in a band and everybody was going to take over the world. Everybody was ready to rock. So what happened with this band is the same old story of having a little bit of steam in the Florida area. Tampa was a big metal area back in the early 80s. And then they basically broke up and went their separate ways. And some of the guys never even played their instruments again. 35 years later, they get a call from a German promoter who tells them that Siren has a huge fan base overseas and wants them to play a festival. And they've never even played in the last 30 odd years. And so the connection is that a good friend of mine is the drummer. And I knew he was in a band called Siren, but you know, like I said, we were all in bands in high school. And I told him when he said that he got this call, I'm like, this doesn't happen, Ed. Like, you guys haven't played in 30 years. You've done nothing. You haven't even hardly played your drums in 30 years. You know, you played in the studio in your house or whatever. So I said, either this is going to be the biggest shit show ever, or it's going to be one of the best feel-good, heartwarming stories you could ever experience. Either way, I want to document it. So I sent a camera crew with Siren to this big festival they played in Germany. And as you know, JJ, in Germany, it's all about heavy fucking metal. And it's so many festivals all across the country. And lo and behold, they go and play this festival, and there's literally a huge fan base of people, you know, singing their words and chanting their name that they never even knew existed. So it was a real interesting story, more than anything, more of a dreams can come true no matter how old you are type of a story, whether you like heavy metal or not. It's more about these guys experiencing this dream for one weekend of being rock stars in their 50s, 30 years after they gave up on them. So it's really interesting when you look at the whole situation and story and the fact that it turned out the way it did.
Well, you know, Spinal Tap, as we've all seen thousands of times, is always the ironic, sarcastic view of what happens to a band. And that's a kind of made it and then disappeared and then kind of comes back with all the cliches that go along with it. And I have to tell you, Twisted had many Spinal Tap moments. I mean, as most bands do. I would say you could ask all of them, Metallica kids, we've all had Spinal Tap moments. I remember specifically coming home from our first UK tour, and Spinal Tap was playing at a theater a couple of blocks from my house. Okay. So here we come back from this tour, and the tour was a super success except for one problem. The very last in-store record signing was a complete disaster.
Right.
The promoter fucked it up completely. And we had been followed from up in Scotland all the way down to London. Every city was sold out in theaters. This was You Can't Stop Rock and Roll tour. The single I Am I Me was a hit. We were on top of the pops. Everything is great. And we're doing these in-store signings. And there's this one fat kid that kept following us and he was a pain in the ass. And he showed up at every signing. You know, it was this fat kid. He just showed up at every signing. And we got so sick of him, like, all right, go to the back. You know, you're taking up too much space, you know. We get to London for the last in-store at Marble Arch at a Virgin or an HMV. And the promoter fucked up and nobody showed up. So here we all are with our Sharpies at the counter, and nobody's there except people buying records from other bands thinking we're cashiers. So they walk up to the front and like they're handing us, you know, stuff thinking we're going to ring it up. And this fat kid shows up, the only one. And he goes, "They're not cashiers. They're Twisted fucking Sister." We were never so happy to see this guy. We're hugging him. Like, we're hugging him going, "Where have you been, man?" Like, and the promoter's going, "I fucked up." You know, just like the Paul Schaefer character.
Kick this ass.
Kick this ass for a man. Kick my ass. It's me. So I came home and I was like, wow, man, you know, the humiliation it never ends.
No.
It never ends, no matter how big you get. So tell me about what year did Siren do this show? And do you remember, was it Whackin'? Was it Bang Your Head?
No, it was called Keep It True Festival. So
Okay.
it was one of those kind of the smaller ones in, Königsberg or whatever. So it was 2018. But like I said, I mean, when you go to Germany, and I think, Raven was on the bill, and Flotsam and Jetsam and those types of bands. And the thing about it is the reason why it really worked is because people in Germany, heavy metal is life. And they're going to this festival with Raven and Flotsam. They're really hardcore metal fans, but they're waiting for Siren. Like I said, it's I've never heard of this before, JJ. Like, this band had this hardcore heavy metal, fucking leather and studs, the fan base that they never knew about. And they go to this festival. It's probably 5,000 people, kind of in a big concert hall sort of a thing, and they're all chanting Siren, and they're singing along with their lyrics to Over the Rainbow that they wrote about the Wizard of Oz in 1983 or whatever. And it's just like, how does this happen in this day and age? And that's, to me, it was such an interesting story. And the cool thing about the documentary is that we were catching it in real time. A lot of great documentaries have archival footage. Here's the Stones in their 72 tour. This was happening in real time, of these guys almost fish out of water. I mean, a couple of the cats hadn't even been in airports since 9/11. And here they are traveling across the world trying to figure out what a filter is on an Instagram, or what do I check, and why do I have to take off my shoes? Stuff that we go through on a daily basis, and it's no big deal. They've not experienced this. Okay. So to capture all that, it was just really, really cool. Like I said, a really interesting documentation of these guys who are experiencing all of these trials and tribulations of being in a rock and roll band touring the world, but they're doing it for the first time ever in their mid-50s. So it really was a cool kind of, like I said, a real great story of how your dreams can come true no matter how old you are.
What was the foundation of their music? How did people know their music? Did they have a couple of demos?
They had a couple demos. Yeah, they did a couple demos. And I think there might've been some kind of a record that came out, how you used to do it. You would press it yourself, sort of a thing. So these demos kind of floated across the sea to where it was, like I said, people just latched onto it. There's one guy in the movies who says, if I had the opportunity to see Siren or Iron Maiden, I would choose Siren. Siren is the best heavy metal band ever. And like, these guys are saying it and they're believing it, and it's real to them, and their dream come true happens when they get to see Siren live. So conversely, it was just this really interesting, cool bit of kismet, if you will, of these fans in Germany hoping to see Siren, and Siren in Tampa hoping to go play in Germany, and it all connects.
Yeah, well, people don't understand. American kids who don't go to Europe or South America do not understand the religion of heavy metal around the world. There is a religion of metal that is so unbelievable, and it's almost impossible to explain. Like, people will say to me, "Why don't you tour America?" I said, "Why bother?
Right.
I can go to Europe and play in front of 100,000 people anytime I want."
Yeah.
Because we can headline Bang Your Head, we can headline Whackin', we can headline Hellfest, we can headline all these. I mean, they're everywhere. Not only are there festivals in Germany and in Holland and in Denmark, but what's really interesting, what we don't have here in America, which people really don't fathom, is that culturally music is appreciated in Europe. And so towns get money to put on shows in the town squares all summer long.
Yeah.
And Twisted will play in some city in Finland I've never heard of. I can't even pronounce it. You get to the city. It's a beautiful, bucolic city out of a movie set. There in the town squares, a gigantic stage. And for 2 weeks, they feature bands every single night and they want people to come for free.
Right.
And the towns are given money by the government to subsidize these shows. And this is a life that nomadically many of the metal bands have followed over the years, because America is basically this, you have to have a record, you got to do a tour, you'll be packaged as an oldies group or as a hair band or this, it's all that crap that you get saddled with in America. Whereas in Europe, it's just legendary band after legendary band after legendary band. So it'll be us, Kiss, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, you name it. And these festivals are gigantic, And then we get to South America. Now, have you done South America yet?
We have not. It's one country. Just insane though, right?
It is, first of all, Mexico is the #1 Beatle country in the world. They've got 60 Beatle cover bands in Mexico. Okay. Just as a Beatle fan, you should know.
Right.
As a metal fan, it is our #1 Spotify country. Okay. We did our final show when we retired in 2016 with Kiss in Monterrey, Mexico. That was our farewell show. But we had been all through South America. And when you get to South America and you play soccer stadiums and you see the kids in the crowd, and get this, in America, the fans tend to be 35 to 60. Okay. In Europe, the fans tend to be 17 to 60 because the parents will bring their kids.
Right.
But in South America, the fans are 15 to 22. Okay. They weren't born yet when We're Not Going to Take It was recorded. And they fill soccer stadiums and they stand outside of your hotel room, and you walk outside of your hotel and there's thousands of kids there, all 17, 18, 19, all with cutoff vests, all with Iron Maiden, Kiss, Judas Priest, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister patches. And you look at them and you go, why? Like, and do you support new metal bands? And that's the quandary, because they don't support new metal bands. They live for this 80s lifestyle. And,
well, that's the problem. Like, I was talking to Andy Copping last year. He's the promoter for Download. You guys have played Download in England. Yep. And I said, where's the headliners 10 years from now? When Twist is now retired and Iron Maiden, maybe 10 years, who knows? Iron Maiden could play for the 50 years. I'm just saying, as the years go by, the headliners remain pretty much the same. What happens when those bands are done? Who's replacing them that can draw 100,000 people, to these countries, and B, know how to entertain that type of a crowd? Because as you know, it's not easy. 100,000 people. I mean, you got to really be locked in to get that type of a crowd behind you. So it's a little bit concerning to me. There's a few bands that are kind of picking up the torch, but not as many as there need to be able to populate all these festivals in the year 2030, let's say.
You're right. I think Avenged Sevenfold, Slipknot, for example.
Yeah.
They could be the next generation. But when I was listening to your conversation with Rick, you guys were talking about the fact that grunge didn't translate necessarily into that kind of era. And that's very true. What's really mystifying to me, and how badly derided 80s metal was among the critics back in the 80s. And yet it's unbelievable worldwide staying power.
Yes.
It is absolutely mind-blowing. I don't think any one of us could have predicted that back then.
No, you're right. I mean, the staying power of and you could say 80s metal, but it was almost like the last great era of rock and roll. And why I say that is, I love a lot of 90s bands. I love a lot of bands from now. There's no doubt about it. But what was going on in the 70s and 80s was the attitude was more of just having fun, having a great time. You would go to the rock and roll show and enjoy it and sing along and chant along. And that kind of became not cool for a while if you're looking through the 90s. And of course, everything has to cleanse itself, but it's just coming back now, like with our band, with Fozzy or with Hailstorm or with, the Struts and these type of bands. They're more of capturing the vibe of your era and bringing it into this era where it's okay to have fun at a rock and roll show. And that's the way it should be. But there's a real dirge of that for the longest time. And I think that's part of why you go to a rock and roll show. That's why we all love Van Halen. That is, you say the name Van Halen, it has a connotation, a rock and roll fucking party, man. Like what a great experience it was to see Van Halen. There's not a lot of bands that when you say that name, image of a party comes up, and that's what rock and roll should be.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I thought the whole grunge era was looking at your shoes and complaining.
Yeah.
And we used to make fun on stage going, you know, if you're going to keep complaining, go to a therapist, but don't bring me down at a show. Like, I'm going to a show to feel better, not to like want to slit my wrists.
And that was a real thing at the time. And there was a lot of aggro for the kids of that era. And I was one of them, but I love heavy metal so much that I never really steered down the grunge era, even though I was the right age for it, 21, 22, whatever it be. I was still pissed because I wanted more 80s heavy metal to continue on forever, right? But if you look at that now, and we talked about it on Beato's show, most of those bands are gone or the singers have died or whatever it may be. It was just too serious and too kind of intense. And you know, it's okay to sing "I Want to Rock." You know, it doesn't have to be Jeremy spoken in class today about some kid that killed his fellow students or whatever. That's getting pretty deep for a rock and roll band.
You know, you're right. In fact, here's the part that really mystified me when Twisted came back. So you talk about Siren, how no one knew that Siren was going to be big and that there was this underground vibe that wanted to hear Siren.
Sure.
So Twisted Sister ended in 87. And when we ended in 87, even though we had multiple platinum albums around the world, we had never been higher than a seventh band on any bill in Europe. Okay. Never. Like it was always like Ozzy, blah, 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 Motorhead, blah, blah, Thin Lizzy, blah, blah, and then Twisted Sister be at the bottom. Right. And that was the Monsters of Rock festivals. We used to do them all the time. All of a sudden, you know, the band ends 15 years, and 15 years later, 2001, 9/11 happens, and the band reforms to do a benefit. The word gets out that the band's reformed, and all of a sudden, these promoters are calling us, going, "Oh my God, we want you back!" And we're like, "Really? You even?" I mean, this shows you how much we had no idea.
Right?
We want us back for what? No, we want you to headline Bang Your Head. We want you to headline Sweden Rock. You want us to headline? We've never been higher than number. So here we had 15 years off. We go into a studio with Marshall amplifiers. We had to learn how to stand in front of 120 decibel amplifiers again, because people don't understand. It's like going to war.
Yeah.
You can't go from a retired wrestler to WrestleMania overnight.
That's right.
I mean, you have to work your way up and get your body prepared, right? In every manner, way, shape, and form. We had to get ourselves back. And, you know, we did Sweden Rock, our first show back, and we were having problems. And then we did Bang Your Head, which is a major German festival.
We've played it before. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you know what that is. We headlined Bang Your Head and we had a much better show. And then for some crazy reason, Wacken calls up, and Wacken had Iced Earth as a headliner. And it was Iced Earth and Slayer. And for those people who don't understand the nuances of German metal festivals, there's straight metal festivals, there's heavy metal festivals, there's commercial metal festivals, there's death metal festivals, there's black metal festivals. You know, there's festivals where it's just bands like Kill Your Mother, Hang the Nun, you know, Kill the Dog, Burn the Church. I mean, crazy shit. Well, Wacken is one of those, you know, festivals in which you can't tell the band's names because it looks like dyslexic Chinese people are writing. Please don't send me emails. Okay.
He's right.
But you can't even understand the writing, right? So they said, well, the promoter, the head guy at Wacken says to the promoter at Bang Your Head, "We lost Ice Earth. The singer just quit."
Oh, okay.
What should we do? And he goes, "Why don't you get Twisted Sister?" And he goes, "Twisted Sister? Why? We're not going to take it. I Want to Rock. Why do I want that at a festival in which Slayer's headlining the night before?" And he goes, "Trust me, they're entertainers. Trust me, they know what to do with 100,000 people. Trust me, they'll do the show." So the guy reluctantly hired us, and we headlined the Saturday night. Slayer headlined the Friday. Okay, so we did the show, and of course, what happens by the time Twisted takes over? We have 100,000 people dressed in black, women looking way fiercer than the guys, by the way, all screaming, "I want to rock. We're not going to take it." And all of a sudden, death metal festivals from all around the world start calling us up. Why do death metal festivals call Twisted? They don't call Rat. They don't call Motley. They don't call Van Halen. Why? Because our first album, Under the Blade, had songs like Destroyer, Kill or Be Killed, Sin After Sin. There was a certain kind of death demonic nature to Under the Blade, which became a favorite among death metal bands like Dimmu Borgir, who covered our songs. So we became cool to be in death metal festivals. So all of a sudden, Twisted's headlining straight metal festivals, commercial metal festivals, pop metal festivals, death metal festivals, black metal festivals.
Well, but Twisted was always heavier too, though. That's why. I mean, you had a couple pop hits, but the band at its core was always heavier than all the rest of those bands.
But you know that. A lot of people,
I got you.
You know that. A lot of people were skeptical. So we kind of came back. So when your documentary came on, it affected me in so many ways because of A, the misinterpretation of a band's life and what it means to people and the kind of dedication they have. B, that these guys lived it. They wanted it. It was in their heart and soul. See, this story is not unusual. You know that Seven Dust, you know how Seven Dust started? Seven Dust was a 7-year evolution. It started out in Atlanta,
right,
with a band called Red Threat, which was an AC/DC type cover band. And then it went from Red Threat to Roulette. And Roulette was like a Journey-ish. Like, in other words, a couple of guys changed. It was like a Journey-ish band. Then they went from Roulette to Snake Nation, which was like they kept on following these trends and they kept missing them. Do you know what I mean? By 6 months, they kept following and then missing by 6 months, following and missing by 6 months. And Snake Nation turned into Stiff Kitty, and Stiff Kitty turned into something else. And this kept going over a 7-year period. And finally, one day I'm down there watching, I think it was Stiff Kitty. And I said to Morgan, the opening band was Body and Soul with Lejean was the singer. And he was an R&B singer. And he blew me away. And I said to Morgan, you get that guy, call me. If you ever get that guy, call me. Otherwise, don't call me, because I've spent 6 years trying to make this happen and it's not happening. And they got Lejean. And they came up to New York, which I didn't think they would do. And I booked them in a bunch of clubs in New York City. And the lead singer and the guitar player gets arrested for drunk driving on the West Side Highway. And he gets put in the Tombs in New York for 4 days. And he's 17 years old. And he's so traumatized, he quits the band when he goes back to Georgia. And who do they get? They get Clint, who is freaking Clint. I mean, just genius songwriter, great singer, great player in every way. That shows you how life can just be so weird. And eventually they signed the deal. And here we are 25 years later, still talking about Seven Dust, because there happened to be a great band. But they could have, the point being is they could have missed the boat.
Yeah. Well, that happens to 90% of the bands, even more. You know what I mean? And that's, like I said, that's why I'm too old for this shit. And the reason why I titled it that is because I said to the camera guys before they even left, at some point, one of these guys in the band is going to say, I'm too old for this shit. And they said it 3 times. We didn't even have to prompt them. We got it. But the reason why it works is because, like you said, they were too old for this shit. You know what I mean? Like this just doesn't happen. Like you mentioned, Seven Dust barely was able to get there after missing all of these trends. And most bands don't have that wherewithal to be able to continue. And another thing is this movie is a little bit like the Anvil movie, but the Anvil movie is different in that Anvil never stopped. Anvil played from 1980 till now, toured as much as they could. Siren didn't do that. You know, like I said, some of the guys didn't even play in another. Ed, my friend, never played in another band again. He went on and became a very successful computer programmer, had a studio in his house, played for fun. And here you are 30 years later getting this call, you know, now we want you to play this festival. Well, now you have to get the band back together. Now you have to rehearse. Now you have to figure out what the fuck you're going to do. We were able to capture all that. Which is great. You know, when Twisted ended at 87, or 88, I became a manager for years. And then I retired from management. I became a stereo salesman. Yeah. Wow.
And I'm selling stereos on the East Side at a place called Lyric Hi-Fi. And I would go into people's houses to put their stereos in, and I'd see my CDs there. And I like the movie The Wrestler, you know, like you don't want to say anything because you really don't need to hear the story. I don't need to feel bad for myself, but I would be sitting there vacuuming the floor going, I'm nothing but a freaking audio salesman. This is JJ French, you know, look at me now. And then by some incredible happenstance, Seven Dust became successful. I managed them. And then from there, Twisted kind of came back, which is a good story, it's a great story. We have a documentary out, which I'm sure you've probably seen it. But still in all, what you did was with this movie, you kind of gave hope and inspiration to people who lived this kind of dream. And there was thousands of these bands, thousands of them, Chris. Now, where are they today? What is going on with Siren today? Well, they played the festival, and the cool thing was that you see kind of the epilogue of the documentary. They were the highest selling merch band of the weekend. So that gave them a little bit more kind of a confidence. So they made another record, and they had other gigs as a lot of bands did last year when COVID hit. So I think once touring starts and festivals play, I think they'll have the option to play a couple more of these festivals. But I think more than anything, they were able to end
the story on their own terms, and even continued a little bit more of just having some fun. I know they just shot a music video for one of their new songs the other day. So they're playing. They now have this element of the band in their lives. Yes, they still have their careers, but in the back of their heads, they know they can go play a weekend show at the Brass Mug in Tampa if they want to, or whatever it might be. And I think the fact that it's opened up to them again, as you know, it's nothing better than playing in a band, man. There's nothing better, whether you're playing in front of 100,000 people or 100 people. When you lock in with the boys and everything sounds good, that's a certain high that you can't replicate. Now they have that back in their lives again, which is great.
And you, professionally, what's your plans the next several years?
Man. I mean, we've never stopped working with AEW because we wrestle out of Jacksonville, where our boss is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we have a venue there that we can work. We wrestled in front of no people for a while. Now we have limited crowds. All of our Fozzy touring obviously got postponed. But in the meantime, we're able to finish our new record. We're on Sony now, so it's all about singles. Things have changed where we have this record, and I've got the whole track listing from 1 to 12. Like, yeah, we just want singles right now. But we're ready to go when the world gets back on track. I think a lot of bands are. That's one of the cool things. I'm hoping that, over the next year, there's going to be some great music released, because none of us could go out and play anywhere. You just had to concentrate more on writing those songs and honing them in and making them great. So we're ready to go whenever the world opens and we're allowed to go back on the road. We'll be there.
And you follow your passion, which is great. And you reinvent yourself all the time, which is important. And I have a book coming out called Twisted Business, and it's the art of reinvention. I talk about this all the time. I do motivational speaking now. That's essentially what I do. Mm-hmm. As I have my podcast, I do motivational speaking. I'm an author. I write for several magazines. I write a Beatle column for a magazine because I just happen to be a sick freaking Beatle fan.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Welcome to the club. Portnoy just makes me ill. You guys, listen, you probably read all the Bruce Spicer books and all that stuff. And I interview those guys all the time. You know what I tell them? I go, you guys are so fucked up and so sick that I appreciate the fact that you are that sick, because it makes it easier for people like me to not have to be that sick.
Right. We can just read about it.
I can just read your book. Like when I want to know that Paul looked at John at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on January 6, 1966, that your shoes are untied, I can read that in your fucking book. I don't need to study that shit.
That's right.
So anyway, listen, I understand you have a hard cut. I got to go. I could talk to you for hours about this. We haven't really even discussed wrestling, but maybe some other time.
Yeah, we'll do it again, man.
We can discuss music. We can discuss metal, whatever. But thank you so much for your time on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, dude, it's a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you for sure. And we'll do a Beatles episode next.
Okay. That'll be great. Wonderful.
Thank you, JJ. Appreciate it, man.
Take care, Chris. Bye-bye.
Cheers, buddy.